Marcus was just 22, but life had already taught him tough lessons. He worked as a courier in the big city, riding an old bicycle through crowded streets, delivering packages from dawn till late at night. Every day felt the same. Wake up early, rush through deliveries, and return to his small rented room, exhausted. He had no choice but to work hard. He had dreams, but they felt too far away, almost impossible to reach. The city was full of opportunities, but only for those with money, education, or connections. Marcus had none of those. He had moved to the city 2 years ago, hoping to make a better life for himself. But so far, all he had managed was to survive. His earnings barely covered his rent and food. Some nights, he went to bed hungry, telling himself that tomorrow would be better. Still, Marcus never complained. He was grateful for the job, even if it didn't pay much. At least it kept him moving, kept him busy. He had learned every street and shortcut, weaving through traffic like a professional. He had no luxury, no expensive clothes, no weekends to rest, but he had a heart full of determination. One evening after a long day, Marcus was on his way back home. His legs ached from cycling all day, and his stomach growled, reminding him that he hadn't eaten since morning. The air was cool, and the streetlights flickered as he passed through a quiet road. Most people had already gone home, and the shops were closing. He was thinking about how he would manage rent this month when he heard a noise from a dark alley nearby. At first, he ignored it, thinking it was just the usual city sounds. But then he heard a woman's voice, frightened, pleading. Marcus stopped his bike. His heart pounded. He knew that getting involved could bring trouble, but something inside him wouldn't let him walk away. He couldn't just pretend he didn't hear it. Slowly, he approached the alley. In the dim light, he saw a young woman, dressed in expensive clothes, her face pale with fear. 2 men stood close to her, their voices low but threatening. She clutched her bag tightly, her eyes darting around, looking for help. Marcus knew she was in danger. Without thinking twice, he stepped forward. "Hey, what's going on here?" he said, making his voice strong even though his hands trembled slightly. The men turned to him, surprised. Marcus knew he wasn't strong enough to fight them both, but he wasn't going to back down. The woman's eyes met his, silently begging for help. Marcus's mind raced. He needed to act fast. Taking a deep breath, he tried to stay calm. He had faced tough situations before, but this was different. He had no idea that this moment would change his life forever. The 2 men turned toward Marcus, their eyes narrowing. They hadn't expected anyone to interrupt them, especially not a young courier in worn-out clothes. The alley was quiet, and for a moment, there was only silence. Marcus felt his heart pounding in his chest, but he didn't move back. He couldn't leave the woman alone. She was still holding her bag tightly, her hands shaking. Her wide, fearful eyes met Marcus's, silently pleading for help. He didn't know who she was, but that didn't matter. She needed someone to stand up for her, and he was the only one there. "Mind your own business," one of the men said, stepping closer to Marcus. His voice was low, firm, almost like a warning. Marcus swallowed hard. He knew he was no fighter, and these men looked dangerous. But he also knew he couldn't just walk away. His mind worked fast. He needed to distract them, make them think twice before doing anything worse. "I already called the police," Marcus said, pulling out his old phone and pretending to press a button. "They'll be here any second." The men looked at each other. Uncertainty flashed across their faces. The city had strict laws, and getting caught could mean serious trouble for them. The taller man cursed under his breath. "Let's go," he muttered to his companion. With one last glance at Marcus, they turned and walked away, disappearing into the dark street. Marcus waited until they were out of sight before turning to the woman. She was still frozen in place, breathing fast. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice softer now. She nodded but said nothing at first. Then, after a moment, she spoke. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come." Marcus gave her a small smile. Well, you don't have to find out now. She took a deep breath, calming herself. Now that the danger was gone, Marcus could see her more clearly. She was young, maybe around his age, with long, silky hair and bright blue eyes. Her clothes were elegant, and she smelled like expensive perfume. It was clear she belonged to a world far different from his. "I'm Olivia," she said, offering a trembling hand. "Marcus," he replied, shaking it gently. She looked around, as if realizing for the first time that she was still in a dark alley. "I should go," she murmured. Marcus nodded. "Do you need a ride somewhere?" He glanced at his bicycle, knowing it wasn't the best transport for someone like her. To his surprise, she smiled, a little amused. "I think I'll be fine. But can I at least thank you properly? Maybe buy you a coffee or something?" Marcus hesitated. He wasn't used to people offering him kindness, especially someone from her world. But something about Olivia seemed different. "All right," he said, not knowing that this simple decision would change his life forever. Marcus never expected to sit across from someone like Olivia in a fancy cafe. The place was nothing like the small roadside tea stalls he sometimes visited. The warm lighting, soft music, and the rich aroma of coffee in the air made it clear that this was a place for people who lived a different kind of life, one he had never known. He sat carefully, feeling out of place in his worn-out jacket and old sneakers. Across from him, Olivia looked completely at ease, stirring her coffee with a small silver spoon. She had calmed down now, but there was still a hint of nervousness in her eyes. "Are you sure you're okay?" Marcus asked, breaking the silence. She nodded, offering him a small smile. "Yes, thanks to you." Marcus shrugged. "I just happened to be there." She tilted her head, studying him. Most people would have ignored it, or walked away, but you didn't. He didn't know what to say to that. He had acted without thinking, but wasn't that what anyone should do when they saw someone in trouble? Then again, he had seen enough of the world to know that not everyone thought that way. The waiter arrived, setting a steaming cup of coffee in front of him. Marcus had never ordered anything this expensive before. He usually drank instant coffee from a small packet at home, the cheapest brand available. He hesitated for a moment before taking a sip. It was smooth, rich, completely different from what he was used to. Olivia watched him with curiosity. "So, Marcus, what do you do?" He set the cup down. "I'm a courier. I deliver packages all over the city." She looked impressed. "That sounds tough." He chuckled. "It is, but it's a job. Pays the bills. Most of them, at least." Her expression changed, as if she suddenly realized something. "You were probably on your way home when you saw me, weren't you?" Marcus nodded. "Yeah. Long day." She bit her lip, guilt flashing across her face. "And now I've dragged you here when you're probably exhausted." He shook his head. "It's fine. A free coffee isn't a bad way to end the day." She laughed softly, and for the first time, the tension between them eased. They talked for a while, and Marcus found himself surprised at how easy it was to speak with her. She wasn't just a rich girl with no worries. She had dreams too. She wanted to start her own business, do something meaningful instead of just living in her family's shadow. Time passed quickly, and before they knew it, the cafe was closing. Olivia glanced at her phone and sighed. "I should probably go." Marcus nodded. "Yeah, me too." She hesitated, then reached into her bag and pulled out a small card. "Here, my number. If you ever need anything, or just want to talk." Marcus took it, unsure what to say. As he watched her leave, he had no idea that this was just the beginning of something much bigger than he had ever imagined. Marcus stared at the small card in his hand as he rode his bicycle home. Olivia's number was printed neatly on it, along with her full name, Olivia Whitmore. He didn't know much about rich people, but that name sounded important. Maybe her family owned businesses or something. He had never asked. As he reached his tiny rented room, he tossed his bag onto the small wooden chair in the corner. The room was barely big enough for a bed and a cupboard, but it was home. He placed the card on the table and sighed. Should he call her? Would she even remember him tomorrow? For the next few days, Marcus continued with his routine, waking up early, delivering packages, and weaving through traffic on his bicycle. But something felt different. His mind kept going back to that night. The way Olivia had smiled, the way she had listened to him, as if he was someone important. It was strange, feeling noticed. One evening, as he sat on his bed, exhaustion pulling at his body, he picked up the card again. Before he could overthink it, he pulled out his old phone and sent a simple text. "Hey, it's Marcus. Hope you're doing well." He didn't expect a quick reply, but a few minutes later, his phone buzzed. "Marcus, I'm so glad you texted. I was hoping you would. How have you been?" A smile tugged at his lips. He wasn't used to someone being excited to hear from him. They texted back and forth for a while. And before he knew it, they had been talking for almost an hour. Olivia asked about his job, his life, his dreams. No one had ever asked him those things before, not like this. A few days later, Olivia texted him again. "Let's meet up. I want to hear more about your crazy delivery adventures." Marcus hesitated. He wasn't sure if he fit into her world, but there was something about Olivia that made him feel comfortable, like he didn't have to pretend to be someone he wasn't. They met at a quiet park this time, away from the fancy cafes and busy streets. Olivia had brought sandwiches and coffee. They sat on a bench, watching people walk by as they talked. Marcus found himself telling her stories about his toughest deliveries. The time he got caught in the rain, the time a dog chased him for blocks, and the time an old woman gave him free soup just for being kind. Olivia laughed at every story, completely engaged. "You're amazing, Marcus," she said suddenly. He blinked. "What? No, I'm just a guy who delivers packages." She shook her head. "No, you're kind, hardworking, and brave. That night, you saved me. And now, I want to help you." Marcus frowned slightly. "Help me?" She smiled. "I think I know someone who can give you a better job, one where you don't have to struggle so much." Marcus wasn't sure what to say. Was this the chance he had been waiting for? Or was it too good to be true? Marcus didn't know how to respond. No one had ever offered to help him before. He had spent years working hard, believing that if he wanted something better, he had to fight for it alone. But here was Olivia, someone from a completely different world, telling him she wanted to help. "You don't have to do that," Marcus said after a moment. "I mean, I appreciate it, but I don't want charity." Olivia shook her head. "It's not charity, Marcus. It's an opportunity. You saved me that night, and I want to do something for you in return." Marcus looked away, unsure. He wasn't used to favors. Life had taught him that nothing came for free. But there was something about Olivia, something genuine in her voice. She wasn't offering help out of pity. She truly believed he deserved better. "Who do you know?" he finally asked. She smiled. "My father. He owns a company, and I think he might have a job for you. Something stable, something with a future." Marcus's stomach tightened. Her father? That sounded serious. What would a rich businessman think of a courier with no degree, no fancy resume, no connections? "I don't know, Olivia," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "I don't think someone like me fits in that kind of place." She frowned. "And why not? You're smart, hardworking, and honest. That's what matters." Marcus wanted to believe her, but doubt still lingered in his mind. He had spent so long fighting to survive in a world that never gave him a break. Could things really change just like that? "I'll think about it," he finally said. Olivia nodded, understanding that he needed time. "That's all I ask." For the next few days, Marcus couldn't stop thinking about her offer. He continued delivering packages, weaving through the city on his bike. But now, there was something different, a question that wouldn't leave his mind. What if? What if he took the chance? What if this was the break he had been waiting for? Finally, After 3 days of going back and forth in his mind, he sent Olivia a message. "Okay, I'll meet your father." Her reply came instantly. "Great. I'll set up a meeting. You won't regret this, Marcus." The day of the meeting arrived faster than he expected. Marcus put on his best clothes. Not much, just a clean shirt and the only pair of nice shoes he owned. He stood outside the tall glass building, staring up at it. It was nothing like the small delivery offices he was used to. He took a deep breath and stepped inside. This was a new world, and he had no idea what waited for him on the other side. But one thing was clear. This meeting could change everything. Marcus walked into the tall glass building, feeling like he had stepped into another world. The floor was polished, shining so brightly that he could almost see his reflection. The air smelled of expensive perfume and coffee. People in suits walked past him, talking on their phones, looking busy and important. He swallowed hard, suddenly feeling small. His clothes were clean, but they were nothing compared to the designer suits worn by the men and women around him. For a second, he thought about turning back. Maybe he didn't belong here. Maybe this was a mistake. But then he remembered Olivia's words. "You're smart, hardworking, and honest. That's what matters." Taking a deep breath, he walked up to the front desk. A woman with neatly tied hair looked at him. "Can I help you?" "I have a meeting with Mr. Whitmore," Marcus said, hoping he sounded confident. She checked her computer, then gave him a small nod. "You're expected. Take the elevator to the top floor." Marcus thanked her and stepped into the elevator. As it rose, his heart pounded. This wasn't just a simple interview. This was a chance to change his life. The doors opened to a large office with tall windows showing the city skyline. Sitting behind a huge desk was Olivia's father, Richard Whitmore. He looked up as Marcus stepped in. He was a tall man with sharp eyes, dressed in a dark suit that probably cost more than everything Marcus owned. "So, you're the young man who helped my daughter," Mr. Whitmore said, his voice deep and measured. "Yes, sir," Marcus replied, standing straight. Mr. Whitmore studied him for a moment, as if trying to figure him out. "Olivia speaks highly of you. She says you're hardworking and reliable." Marcus nodded. "I try my best, sir." The older man leaned back in his chair. "You don't have a degree. You don't have experience in an office job. So why should I hire you?" Marcus took a deep breath. He had expected this question. "Because I don't give up. I've worked hard every day. No matter how tough it gets. I learn fast, and I'm willing to prove myself." Mr. Whitmore tapped his fingers on the desk, thinking. Most people in this company come from prestigious schools. They have connections. Do you really think you can keep up? Marcus met his gaze. "I know I can." There was a moment of silence. Then, to Marcus's surprise, Mr. Whitmore gave a small smile. "I like confidence. I'll give you a chance. But only one. You start as an intern. Prove to me that Olivia's faith in you isn't misplaced." Marcus nodded firmly. "I won't disappoint you." As he left the office, his heart raced. He had done it. He had taken the first step into a new world. But he knew this was just the beginning. Now, he had to prove he belonged. Marcus's first day at the office was nothing like he had imagined. He thought he would be doing important work, maybe learning about business, but instead, he was given the smallest tasks, making copies, organizing files, and bringing coffee for employees who barely noticed him. At first, it was frustrating. He wanted to prove himself, but how could he do that when no one gave him real work? Still, he remembered what Olivia had told him before he started. No job is too small. Do your best, and people will notice. So, he worked hard. He arrived early and stayed late. When someone needed help, he was the first to step in. Even when his tasks were simple, he made sure to do them perfectly. And slowly, people started noticing. One day, a senior employee named Mr. Bennett called him over. "Marcus, can you sort these reports for me?" "Yes, sir," Marcus replied, taking the stack of papers. As he organized them, he noticed a mistake in one of the numbers. It was small, but it could cause a big problem if left unchecked. He hesitated. Should he say something? Would they even listen to an intern like him? Taking a deep breath, he walked back to Mr. Bennett. "Sir, I noticed something in these reports. I think there's an error in this section." Mr. Bennett raised an eyebrow. "Let me see." Marcus showed him the mistake, explaining how it could affect the company's calculations. Mr. Bennett looked at him thoughtfully. "Good eye, Marcus. Most interns wouldn't even read these reports, let alone catch a mistake." That was the first time Marcus felt like he truly belonged. From that day on, things changed. More people started giving him real work. They saw that he wasn't just some courier who got lucky. He was sharp, hardworking, and determined to succeed. Even Mr. Whitmore noticed. One evening, as Marcus was finishing up for the day, Olivia stopped by his desk. "I heard about the mistake you caught," she said with a proud smile. "You're making a real impression here." Marcus smiled back. "I just want to prove that I deserve this chance." "You already do," she said softly. For the first time in his life, Marcus felt like he had a real future ahead of him. He had come a long way from delivering packages on his bicycle, but he also knew one thing: this was only the beginning. There were bigger challenges ahead, and he was ready to face them. Months passed, and Marcus continued to prove himself. He no longer felt like an outsider in the office. His hard work, attention to detail, and willingness to learn had earned him respect. People no longer saw him as just an intern. They saw him as someone valuable. One afternoon, Mr. Whitmore called him into his office. Marcus took a deep breath and stepped inside. The man who had once doubted him now looked at him with something close to approval. "You've done well, Marcus," Mr. Whitmore said. "I've been hearing good things about you." "Thank you, sir," Marcus replied, standing tall. Mr. Whitmore leaned forward. "Your internship is ending soon. Normally, interns move on, but I see potential in you. How would you like a permanent position here?" Marcus's heart pounded. This was it, the opportunity he had been working for. A real job, a real future. He had started as a simple courier, and now he was being offered something he had never dreamed possible. "I would be honored, sir," he said, keeping his voice steady despite the excitement inside him. Mr. Whitmore nodded. "Good. You'll start as an assistant in the finance department. Learn everything you can. If you keep up this attitude, you'll go far." As Marcus left the office, he felt like he was walking on air. He had done it. He had turned his life around. That evening, he met Olivia at a quiet cafe. As soon as she saw his face, she knew. "You got the job, didn't you?" she asked, grinning. Marcus nodded. "I did, and it's all thanks to you." She shook her head. "No, Marcus, you earned this. I just gave you a chance. You made the most of it." He smiled, realizing she was right. He had been given an opportunity, but everything after that had been his effort, his determination. Looking back, he couldn't believe how much his life had changed since the night he saved Olivia. He had gone from struggling every day to having a stable job, a real career. And more than that, he had found a friend who believed in him. As they sat there, talking and laughing, Marcus knew this was only the beginning. The future was open, and for the first time in his life, he was ready to embrace it.